Hello and welcome back to another episode of Life Uncovered. We're joined today by Pip. How are you doing, Pip?
Good, mate. You?
Yeah, good, thank you. We're going to just go through why he's a Christian. Before we get into all that stuff, we're going to do some quick fire questions as we usually do, just so we can get to know Pip a little bit more. There is a plant in our way, but I can still see him. I can still see his beautiful looks across the room.
There you go. Need more than a plant to cover that.
If you could combine two animals, this is a really weird question. I came up with this one whilst I was sat here earlier. If you could combine two animals, right, and be that animal, what two animals would you choose?
Okay, so for duck is got to be part of it. Criminally underrated, the duck.
As in like cuisine or?
No. I mean, it can walk.
Yeah.
It can fly.
Yeah.
It can swim. And they look great.
And they taste good.
And they taste good. So, name a better animal. So it'll probably be a duck, and then
A chicken can do all those things though.
and they're not
Apart
quite
from-
flyers or swimmers, aren't they?
That's true, actually. They can jump and flaps.
What would it have to be? It would have to be something like I don't know. I reckon if you crossed a duck with an elephant, because then it'd be big and strong. Couple of tusks.
Brilliant. Do you have any pet peeves?
I don't cope well with the sound of people eating. It's my problem. It's not their problem.
I would say it's their problem too.
If you're allowed to eat, just eat soft foods, please.
Yeah.
Soup.
Or just go into a different room.
Yeah.
Most embarrassing or memorable moment, and you can't say your wedding day or any children being born.
Most embarrassing.
Memorable.
There's been a lot. I mean, I played rugby for most of my adult life, so doing stupid, embarrassing things on socials was very much part of that.
Yeah.
Most memorable, probably the birth. This can sound awful. The birth of my second child.
This is the birth of your second child.
Yeah. So I've got 3 kids.
Yeah.
The first one, I mean that was special in itself, but it was all the labour was a bit of a train wreck. We were awake for about 36, 48 hours. It was horrendous. There was IV antibiotics, and we were in hospital for 11 days. So, yeah, I don't remember huge amounts of that because it was kind of like some weird, hallucinatory dream. The second one, she appeared, within the space of about an hour and a half. There was no issues. It was really straightforward. It was just that was a nothing but joy kind of moment.
Oh, good.
So
the third one,
he was like his brother,
like the first one.
Yeah.
So you've not got any favourites, just a favourite birth.
That's also my daughter as well. So yeah, she's definitely daddy's girl.
Absolutely. The last question then, and I asked this to lots of people. It's my favourite question. What is your death row meal?
It would be some sort of Mexican food.
I like it.
So yeah, fajitas,
Tacos.
probably fajitas and tacos. Probably nachos to start.
Mm-hmm.
Some good salsa, good guacamole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. There we go. So hopefully you've got to know Pip a little bit better. We're just going to jump straight into it and just ask you, can you paint us a picture of your upbringing? Can you tell us maybe where you were from, what your family life was like? Paint us a little bit of a picture of that.
So I was born in North Devon in a town called Barnstable, and I was the second of 3. And I've got an older brother who's about a year and a half older than me.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 2 lovely parents. They're still together. I've got a younger sister. And on paper, I probably had a very positive, very happy childhood. My parents are amazing, really caring, really thoughtful. They spent a lot of time with us. We had, lots of opportunities. We went on holiday. We did lots of nice things. So yeah, on paper, very, very nice childhood. We left Devon when I was. We left Devon a couple of times. We left Devon when I was 6, and we went to South Africa for about 6 months, and then we went back to Devon, and then stayed there until I was 11, and then we moved to Suffolk, which is where I am now.
What was sort of your experience or understanding of the Christian faith in your upbringing? Was that something that was important to you and your family, or was that something that was just sort of an added extra on, or you knew nothing about?
So I grew up going to a Church of England church on a semi-regular basis. My mum took me. Dad, by his own admission, was just not particularly bothered. He was very much on the fence in terms of that. He was like, if that's what you want to do, if you want to take the kids to church, then fine. But he would support that, but not be particularly actively involved. So I kind of grew up with this loose understanding of Christian stories and this kind of Christian framework of morality that I was working within. But it was very much be good and you'll go to heaven. That was very much the message that I had and the message I understood. And when we then left Devon and moved up to Suffolk, we stopped going to church completely.
So even though you've said that you had a good upbringing, a good family who loved you, spent time with you, great parents, you mentioned to me that as a child and a teenager you struggled a bit with your mental health, struggled a bit with depression, and on a couple of occasions tried to or thought about taking your own life. And a lot of people have a misconception, don't they, that people who struggle with mental health and depression come from difficult home lives, difficult backgrounds, but that's not the case with yourself. You've said you had a great upbringing. Your parents loved you and showed you love. Would you be willing to share your struggles with us?
Yeah, of course,
with your mental health at that age. What happened, the view you had of yourself, and the impact this had on your life.
So, for as long as I could remember, and it really is, from as long as I can remember, I had a really negative self-image. Really lacked any sort of self-esteem. Had no value in myself. And as I got a little bit older, so I remember 7 or 8 years old, starting to refuse. I didn't want to go to school. Don't want to go to school. No one likes me. I've got no friends. That was kind of, the start. And then I think by the time I was about 9 or 10, I think I was very much kind of controlled by my depression in a way. That had almost defined me at that point in terms of I really couldn't cope with going to school. So I had 2 long stints where I just didn't go to school at all for about 6 months each in my sort of early teenage years. And there was just this constant feeling of not being enough and of not being worth anything. And so all of my value was placed in what I thought others thought of me. And obviously what you think others think is often very different to the reality. And I think there's an element in my biology where I think I am slightly more vulnerable to mental health. So there's a history of mental health difficulties or difficult mental health situations in my family. I've seen that with my siblings as well to an extent. And I think one of the biggest challenges for me growing up was I had my best friend was my big brother. Still is my best friend. We've always been really close. It's a year and a half apart, and particularly moving a couple of times. Actually, we had no one else, but we always had each other. So my brother was always my best friend, but he was always a year and a half older than me. And so normally as a kid in your friendship groups, your peers, and you're kind of you're on a level with each other. But my brother was always better than me at everything because he was older than me. So he was brighter than me. He was quicker than me. He was stronger than me. He was better at football. He was all of these things, and so I think I just grew up in this environment of constantly comparing myself to something I could never attain, because as soon as I reached the point that I thought I wanted to be, he'd moved on another year as well. So I was forever chasing this kind of ideal of, this is what will make me happy. This is the person that I need to be worth anything. And I never got there. And that just perpetuated. It just got worse. And so as I got older, and then you become a teenager, and all of the normal hormones and challenges that come with that, on top of that kind of almost default setting of kind of depression and a lack of self-worth, it hit me really hard. So I think I was about 13 when I tried to kill myself the first time. I'd had years at that point of suicidal thoughts. I remember, I think I was year 5, when I first wrote "I want to die" all over the back of a piece of paper. And those were just, by that point, it had almost been normalised for me to have those kind of thoughts, have those patterns of thought. And yeah, so I think I was about 13, took an overdose, wrote a note, went to bed, thought that was that. And my brother was the one who found me. Mum and dad took me to the hospital. You know, I can, looking back now, I mean, it's the grace of God that I'm still here.
Mm.
But that was just ongoing then. So that kind of, you know, that's 13. About a year or so later, tried to kill myself again. And I just, you know, these things just didn't seem to be progressing, didn't seem to be getting better. And again, those kind of outward markers, you know, I was doing all right at school. My parents were saying to the teachers, you know, this is what he's saying when he gets home, that he's got no friends, he's on his own. And like, it's not what we see at school. So, you know, that illness just completely distorted my view of reality.
Mm.
And yeah, that was basically my whole early life. As I got into my teens and older teens, sort of, you know, 15, 16, I think I started to mask those feelings more and manage those feelings more. And I think after the second failed attempt, I kind of resolved in my mind that I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't try again, because I could see by that point I was old enough that I could see the pain it had caused. And I could see the damage it was causing. And so there was this element of, well, now I'm just stuck in this life I want to be out of, but I can't leave. In my mind, it was kind of like, you know, one day when my parents are dead, then I'll be able to, you know, that'll be that. I can just, you know, call it a day then.
Had you voiced any of this at any period of your life as a child going up to teenage years? Was there anyone that you felt comfortable enough to open up to about it, or was it something that you, as many people do, would struggle to talk about? Or was it something that you just try to keep bottled up?
I wasn't a talker.
Yeah.
So I think, again, being someone who had, you know, no self-esteem, all my relationships in my mind were built on, I've got to do exactly what that person wants, otherwise they're not going to like me. You know, they're not. My value is only in what I can provide within that. You know, if I do anything that makes that relationship difficult, they're just going to go, no, you're right, actually I don't want to be your friend. So, you know, in terms of people my own age, no, not at all. I mean, my mum and dad, no, not really. I mean, obviously there are a few times where it was fairly obvious that that something needed to happen, but no, I had no interest in talking about it. I didn't think that talking about it would help it at all. And yeah, like I said, I didn't feel capable of talking about it really either. But I think for me, it was like I didn't want people to know. I didn't want to talk about it. And even when those things happened, you know, I never spoke to about anyone. Never spoke to anyone about it. So yeah, but when I went off to university, I went to do psychology. And I think the motivation for doing that was to try and understand why I was so broken and such a mess. And also to try, I definitely had a desire to help people who were in or were going through what I had been through. And actually, I think looking at the people on my course, that was probably quite a common theme. Is those people that had struggled. There was that a desire to understand what on earth, like what is going on, why am I such a mess, but also to try and help other people who are going through that. So, yeah, that I think, you know, university might sound like a bit of a strange one in terms of given everything I said about hating school, and I think for my mum and dad, it was a massive. They never expected me to finish my GCSEs. I think so. It was kind of like each next step was a bonus, and I think the irony of the fact that of me now being a primary school teacher is not lost on them. You know, I spent most of my childhood refusing to go to school, and now I choose to go there every day. So, yeah.
So you went off to uni, and you mentioned a little bit about you getting into the drinking culture because obviously you're in rugby and doing all that sort of stuff. Tell us a little bit about your life, what it looked like when you were at uni.
So I went to university, and it was the first time I think that I'd ever had to like make friends on my own. I think, again, just talking about my brother and the kind of how close we were, because we were so close, actually we shared a lot of friends at home.
Mm.
You know, in school, there was a lot of overlap there between the two of us. So it was the first time I'd had to kind of stand on my own 2 feet and find my own friendship group. And, you know, rugby, so it's so social, and a big part of that rugby university culture, particularly. I mean, I think that's changing now. And I think when I went to university, we were kind of probably at the peak, I think, of that kind of binge culture.
Mm.
You know, it was at that time where you'd have these huge bar crawls that were organised by, you know, student unions, and you'd have hundreds of people, you know, just absolutely wrecking this place.
Mm.
And it was all about, you know, the cheapest drinks possible and as many drinks as possible. And I would go out 2 or 3 times a week, and me and my group of friends kind of prided ourselves on being the ones that would get the most drunk. I was, in my second year, I was the social secretary of the rugby team. So, you know, my job in my mind was to get everyone as drunk as possible and to be the one that drank the most.
To be a nutcase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I revelled in that because, again, you know, for the first time it was something I was actually good at.
Yeah. And even in those teams and in those societies, you're a part of something. Like you feel important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you know, it was all self-worth. It was all self-esteem. If it was, you know, this was somewhere I felt I belonged. There was a group of people who, you know, I could do something that they valued. You know, I was all right at playing rugby, and I was good at drinking, and I would go out and drink. You know, if someone said, should we go out, I'd say yes. You know, if I had assignments to do or work to do, and someone said, should we go out, you know, I might say no, and then the second time they'd ask, I'd cave. And so, you know, looking back now, I can see I still had all of those same insecurities. I was still massively driven by needing to find acceptance. And I was looking in all those places the world says. So in friends, in partying, in girls. I was never very successful with girls. I very quickly got a nickname at university called the Befriender, because I was great at being, you know, that best friend of the girls. And nothing more. So I spent a lot of my university time in the friend zone, which, again, that was, you know, for someone with self-esteem issues, that was kind of like, this is never going to change.
Yeah.
But at least there was an element of my life where I did have some value.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, rugby and drinking and all those kind of things. So yeah, for that was university really for me.
And then during your time at uni, you came across a lovely lady who is now your wife.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about meeting her and how that sort of...
Yeah, so in my third year, I think it was in the January, I was on a night out, and I was, if nothing else, a very friendly drunk, to a point. I think there'd come a point where I'd become a depressive drunk, but usually I'd left places by that point.
Yeah.
So the drunk that people saw was this, you know, very outgoing, very friendly, over the top kind of person. And I met Naomi on a night, and I clearly made some sort of impression because she messaged me the next day. And this was the days of, you know, like Facebook Messenger being the kind of the main way to message people. Now, to my embarrassment, I couldn't remember meeting her. And she at that point was in her first year, and we just started chatting really. And I'd see her on nights out. And for me, my expectation was, you know, this is just going to be another girl where I end up in the friend zone. That was very much the thing. But she very early on, she told me that she was a Christian. I think she'd admit herself that she was not walking with the Lord in the way that she would be proud of at that point. But about 2 or 3 months into kind of first meeting her, I got out of the friend zone, and yeah, we started going out. And in my mind then, it was very much like, well, you know, you go to church on a Sunday, I play rugby on a Saturday. That's your hobby. You know, that's what I saw. That's what I saw it as, you know, based on my own experiences. And so there were times where, you know, after we'd been going out for a little while, she said, "Why don't you come along to church? It'd be good if you came along to church." And, you know, Sunday mornings were not peak time for me. So I went along again because I was scared of, you know, rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, I'll do what I need to do to make you happy. I'll go to church. And I would sit there hungover and completely disinterested and surrounded by these people who I just thought were a bit mad, really, putting their hands up and singing and just all seemed very happy. And I was like, quite quaint, I suppose, was my kind of cynical view of it. That's nice for them, but I know better than that.
Mm.
So, yeah, that's how I met Naomi, and that was the first kind of interaction I had with a Christian outside of, the ones that I knew growing up. Yeah.
Mm. And then that sort of relationship hit a turning point, didn't it?
Mm.
Where, you tell us what happened.
We've been going out for about 3 months, and she messaged me one day and she said, I need to talk to you about something. I was like, okay, that sounds serious.
Mm.
Do you want me to come over now? She said, no, it's fine. It's nothing important. So went and saw her, and she basically just burst into tears and said, I think we need to break up. And the account that she's given me about this has kind of changed over time. Because I think at the time, she's already felt very convicted about our relationship. I think she had a lot of reservations. I know her mum and dad were kind of like, this isn't going to end well. And so they kind of gently challenged her on a couple of things. And knowing them as I do now, I don't doubt that they were incredibly gentle with it. But I think she said at that point, she just broke down and was like, I know. So yeah, she kind of explained all this to me, and I couldn't argue with it. I said, well, fair enough. She basically, the bit that really stuck to me was she said that we were at a point where we were either going to be a very long-term relationship or it had to stop there. And the most important thing in her life at that point was her relationship with Jesus. And she couldn't live a life in a relationship with someone where that wasn't important to them too. And now I said, fair enough. What can you say to that? I wasn't going to turn around and say to her, well, no, you should dump Jesus, not me. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about it since, and I think at the time she was a bit put out that I didn't put up more of a fight. Mm. But I remember going back to my house and my friends, and explaining what happened, and one of them said, well, at least she hasn't converted you. And we laughed and we went out and we got drunk. Mm. And obviously I was a bit heartbroken. Mm-hmm. I was it was painful, but I couldn't argue with her decisions. I couldn't argue with her logic. And in my mind, I really wanted a girlfriend, but I wasn't so desperate for a girlfriend that I was going to pretend to be a Christian for the rest of my life. Yeah. That was just not, I was like, this is not an option. Mm. What I didn't realise at the time, and again I can see now, was that was the seeds were planted at that point, and it really challenged my misconceptions of what being a Christian was all about. It was the first time then that I saw, hang on, there's something else to this Christianity that I didn't know. This person who I care about is willing to sacrifice something that they care about. They're willing to go through pain because that is so important to them. And I think anytime you see anyone sacrifice anything for something else they believe in, you've got to stop and take stock and go, hang on, what's going on here? This is more than just what football team you support. There was something deeper there. And that thought kind of just stuck with me. And I remember that Naomi and I, we kept in touch and we kept talking. And I remember, again, I saw her once on a night out, and we walked home. I walked her home. And I remember saying, yeah, I'm not a Christian, but I think there probably is a God. And I try and follow all the rules, and I'm trying to be a good guy. And she just turned around and said, that's not how it works. She said, it's faith alone in Jesus that saves. None of us can be good enough to get into heaven. And so you kind of had this kind of revelation then, I think, of there's something different about this. My ideas, my beliefs of what this meant aren't right. Because I think if anyone asked me, at that time in my life, oh, do you know much about Christianity? I say, yeah, I know loads about Christianity. I went to Sunday school. Yeah, I'll tell you all the stories. But I didn't know anything about Christianity. I had no idea of the gospel. I had no concept of, why Jesus really went to the cross, or how he fitted into the Bible picture. I could have told you lots of Bible stories. No idea what Jesus had to do with any of them. And so, yeah, that kind of started then a process of kind of thinking and looking deeper. And I remember just sort of having this moment of praying to a God that I didn't know if it existed or not, and just saying, if you do exist, I'd like to know. And as I said, Naomi and I, we'd kind of kept in touch, and she kept inviting me to church, and I started going, and I actually started listening a little bit. And I started looking at these weird people with their hands in the air a little bit differently, and listening to the words that they were singing. And it was about 2 or 3 months after we'd broken up. Naomi had taken me to church again. I'd gone to church with her. And the church that she was going to, they were always really, really clear. When it was communion, they would always have a big meal afterwards. And the pastor would always be really clear that, this is something really important. This means a lot. It might only be, a little cracker and some grape juice, but it represents a lot. And if you're not a Christian, there's food coming. Just, we'd really appreciate it if you just let it go by. And so I think 2 or 3 times I'd been there when it was, just happened to have been there when it was communion on the fourth Sunday. And, I'd let it pass by, and that was fine. And there was finally this Sunday, and I think ahead of time I'd kind of got it by that point. I remember saying to I bumped into one of Naomi's friends, again on a night out, and I was drunk, and I remember saying to her, I think I get it. I think I understand. And then I went to the church that Sunday with her, and when it was time for communion, I took communion, and she burst into tears. And I've said already that I wasn't a great talker, and so as we sort of left, she said, is there anything you want to talk about? I said no. And we just went for a walk. And I think for a long time we were in this kind of difficult situation where I didn't want her to think that I was pretending to be a Christian so that we could start going out again. Mm. And she didn't want to put pressure on me to pretend to be that person. So we had this kind of weird period of time where I think I was really seeking God and seeking answers. And the one person who probably could have given me a lot of those really good answers, I didn't say a word to. And so I think then when it came to that moment of taking communion, that did come as a real shock to her.
So you said that you didn't speak to Naomi about maybe some of the questions and the things that were going through your head as you sort of went to church. What was it that helped you to understand, alongside Naomi's sort of example of sacrifice? Did you speak to anyone else about it? Or was it you going along to church and listening to people talking about Jesus to see the example of the people in the room? What was it that... Was it a slow process?
It was there wasn't... So I definitely didn't have like a light bulb moment. Mm. So it was sort of incremental, I think. And looking back at it now, when I took that first communion, I still had no idea really. I look back now, I think, oh, man, I knew nothing. Mm-hmm. But what I did know was that there was a God, and he loved me and valued me so much that he came down from heaven, lived a pretty rough life, and then willingly died on a cross for all of the stupid things I've done in my life and all the stupid things I'll continue to do. He did that willingly, purely because he loves me. And it was the first time that my value was in no way based on what I had done or what I could do or what I could offer. There was nothing I could offer. There's nothing I could give to God. He did it
Mm-hmm.
You know, he did it completely. And so it was that element of, I'd spent my whole life looking externally for things that would get me where I needed to be, where I wanted to be, and looking into myself and going, oh, what is it about me that can, you know, what's special about me? And I had this, you know, this simultaneous self-hatred and complete pride. You know, I deserve this. I deserve to be popular and have girlfriends, whatever it might be. So I had this, you know, and yet all of a sudden it was, you don't deserve it, but I've done it anyway. And that just was revolutionary. And, you know, I had people at the time, and a cynic would say now, well, you know, all you've done is you've moved your hope from popularity and girls to, you know, some make-believe person in the sky. But that's not the way I see it.
Mm.
For me, it was that element of, Christ is my firm foundation. You know, he doesn't change. You know, he has been the same. He's the same yesterday, today and tomorrow. And so all of a sudden I have someone I can place my confidence in that's never going to change.
Mm.
That's not waiting for me to become some better version of myself before he moves towards me. And yeah, that was incomprehensible for most of my life.
You said something, and it made me think. You said that whilst on a night out, whilst you were drunk, you sort of understood what the Christian faith was about. A lot of people think that to be a Christian or becoming a Christian or Christians are people that have got sort of their lives sorted, in quotation marks for those that are listening. You know, people have got their lives sorted, and that they're going to church, they're dressed a certain way, look a certain way, and then they are acceptable enough to be a part of a church or part of a group or become a Christian. And I think your story completely wipes that out of the park, to say that you were on night out drunk and it hit you of what this is the truth, this is what Christianity is about, this is who Jesus is. And I think that when you said that was like, actually that's how God meets us. He meets us, he comes to us in our lives, doesn't he? He comes to us in our mess, which I think is incredible. What happened to you after you became a Christian? What changed in your life? How was your struggle with your self-image and your mental health and stuff? How did that change or help or not help, or what happened there?
So in the short term, not a lot changed, I don't think.
Yeah.
There were good parts and bad parts to the timing of me becoming a Christian. So that the benefit was, it was at the end of university, and so I left university, and so it was easier to start to change some behaviours, because I left university, I got a job as a teaching assistant. You know, I didn't go out drinking 3 times a week, and you know, I wasn't around those same people anymore. I didn't have those opportunities, but for a good couple of years, I really, really struggled with, anytime I met up with those friends, just slipping back into that same, got to be, you know, I've got to be the life of the party. I've got to be the, you know, I've got to be the one that drinks the most. I've got to be, you know, I really struggled with that. And I think it was that incremental change. You know, Lord, this is not the person I want to be anymore. I remember waking up one day, having gone out the night before and got drunk way too much, and just yabbering on to someone about what it was to be a Christian. And I know I just look back now and I just cringe so much that what sort of testimony was that? You know, God's great, God's amazing, not as good as getting drunk, you know. But that was where I was, and it took time for that. It took time for that to change. But I had that, you know, the Holy Spirit, He convicts us of stuff, and so there was this, you know, this is who I am, but this is not who I want to be. In terms of my own self-image, I think I'd reached a point where I was far more stable. Like I said, my sense of self-esteem and self-worth wasn't so much about who I am and what I'm doing anymore. or how other people see me.
Mm.
You know, there was that kind of constant there with
Mhm.
God. Again, it wasn't like a flick of a switch. There was no, you know, I woke up one day and then the next day I was fine. I would still find that in times of stress, in times of,
Mm.
you know, difficult times, whatever it might be, these very like nonchalant suicidal thoughts would just pop into my mind. That was just kind of like, oh, well, you know, if it all goes pear shaped.
Mm.
But there was that kind of understanding of I'm never going to act on that, and this is fleeting and it's temporary. And whereas I probably spent most of my life thinking this is who I am, this is where I'm going to always be, I think I'd reached a point where there was an understanding of this isn't who I'm going to always be. Actually, one day, it might not even be on this earth. One day, I am going to be fully restored. I'm going to be healed of all of those things. I'll, you know, there will come a time where I never feel depressed, where I never feel anxious or, you know, full of self-loathing or any of those things. And that helped. That really did help. And, you know, these days, thank God, I have no issues in terms of my mental health. I think I have a reasonably high tolerance for stress and busyness and all of those kind of things. And yeah, it's not something that I struggle with at all. You know, I think as my faith has grown, that has, you know, gone in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
Those difficulties, those challenges. And, you know, as you grow in your faith, the Holy Spirit just continues to shine lights on things in your life, and you recognise other things in your life that need sorting. But in terms of my own kind of sense of self, that's really changed.
Mm.
I went out with my dad for a meal or for a drink the other day, and we just were having. It was one of those opportunities where I'd really set my heart on the fact that I want to have a deep chat with him. You know, it's really easy, isn't it, when you see people on a regular basis to just be very surface level. I thought, do you know what? I need to actually have a proper conversation with my dad, and not least to see kind of where he stands in what he believes, but also just, you know, just to get that depth of relationship really. And he asked me at that point, you know, how am I doing? And I kind of said, yeah, I think I'm doing pretty well at the moment. I think I'm in a pretty good space, and he very much felt that was what he saw. You know, that I was content was the word I used. You know, I was content with where I was in life. I was content with, you know, just being abundantly blessed with a family and a job and finances, but more than that, abundantly blessed to have a relationship with the one who created the world and everything in it. So that's kind of, particularly in the mental health side of things, how it's gone. And, you know, I think it's important to talk about those difficulties. I think it's important to talk about those challenges. And in my own life, one of the things that's really helped me is developing a couple of really deep relationships with other Christians who I can, you know, if I am having a difficult time, actually, you know, I can go to them and I can talk to them, and, you know, we can share each other's burdens. Our natural tendency is to look inwards and to be very insular. And in my experience, that doesn't end well.
In line with that then, looking back at your life now, if you could go back in time to young Pip, what would you say to him? What advice would you give him?
It's tricky because in some ways, in a lot of ways, I would not be where I am now if I hadn't gone through the things I went through. You know, that's one of those big truths in Christianity, that God is with us in the suffering, He's with us in the challenges, and actually those things are for our good and for His glory. And I can see that on the other side of it. That being said, you know, my actions as a child, as a teenager, caused a lot of pain, and you know, if I could save myself and, more importantly, my family of having to go through that experience again, then 100% I would go back and just say, you know, this is the gospel. You are known and you are loved, and there is nothing you can do to change that. You can't earn it and you can't lose it. Doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter what you say. Doesn't matter what you do. That is the truth. You are known and you are loved.
What advice would you give to someone who's maybe stumbled across the podcast, or even people that know you well what would you say to someone who is exploring what it means to be a Christian?
I think there's a few different things. The first one is I'd really encourage them to find a church, to find a Christian community. I think community is massively important. You know, there's a lot of our culture at the moment is about, you know, self-help and fixing yourself, and it's very much looking inwards. You know, being your truest self. You know, do what makes you happy. Those are the kind of mantras of our society. And, you know, I think you just have to look at our society to see that's not working. You know, people are more anxious, they're more depressed, they're more lonely than ever. And actually, I think one of the first places to start is Christian community. Because it's there you're seeing, in good examples of Christian community, there you are seeing broken people who haven't got it all together, who don't have all the answers, but have a hope and have something that they trust in, someone that they trust in, who is an ever-present and never changing. And I think, you know, when people see true Christian fellowship, I think it's very attractive. You know, why are these people got this strange joy? Like, there's all these difficult things in their lives. Why are they so happy? Why are they going out of their way to help each other? You know, why are they so generous or hospitable? And it's because we have a God who is generous and hospitable and loving, and who is working in our hearts to make us more like him. And the second one would be, don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, I think there's a worry sometimes, isn't there, that if you kind of come into something and you go and ask difficult questions, that people are going to push back. Again, I think that's cultural. You know, we don't do debate well anymore. You know, public discourse is pretty dire. So there's kind of this feeling that, you know, you've got to be all for something or all against it. Whereas actually, do you know what? You can come and you can explore and you can ask questions, and you can say, well, you know, how does this marry up with science? Doesn't science disprove this? You know, oh, this seems to contradict it. You know, why is it that these 4 accounts of Jesus' life are different in different ways? Surely that means they're not credible. You know, the temptation is to not want to ask any of those questions because you think you're going to step on someone's toes, you're going to hurt their feelings. And again, I think if you find a good, strong Christian fellowship, no, those people aren't going to be afraid of those questions. Actually, they're going to be really excited. So yeah, I think that would be the two. You know, find a church that you can ask good questions in. And if you go and you ask questions, and people are a bit standoffish and get their backs up, you know, Christians aren't perfect either. And it might be that you need to ask someone else. It might be that you need to try a different church, because it might, you know, they're all different. Yeah.
Lovely. Nice one. Thank you very much, Pip. Thank you for being vulnerable to share your life. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Cheers.
So there we have it, the end of the podcast. If you feel moved or you have any questions about this podcast, about anything that has been talked about in this guy's life, then please go on our Instagram at Life Uncovered, leave us a question there, or on the comment section of the YouTube video. Please do, if you've got time, leave us a rating on Spotify, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. It helps us out so much. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you're looking forward to the next podcast.